Alright, this is the video for pages 1 and 2 of the quadratic equations test review, which is Unit 8. For the vocabulary words, I'm just going to let you look those up. I will say quadratic equations, one that has an x squared in it. Linear equation has an x. X-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis, and y-intercept crosses the y-axis. If you can get that from what I just said, you can write it down. Otherwise, you can look it up on Google. All right, as we go into these, we don't really need the calculator because it did it for us. So it says the table below shows some of the values of the function y equals x squared minus 4x minus 5. According to the table, what are the roots of this equation when it equals 0? So now the roots is just another word for the zeros or the solutions. So the zeros are when y equals 0. So it's going to be x equals -1 and x equals 5. All right, and here the x-intercepts are where it crosses the x-axis. So at -2 and 5. And the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So these are just numbers, so y equals -12. Also, the y-intercept is always this one, because when x is 0, those go away, and that what's left is always the y-intercept. Then the vertex, this point down here, which is 2, -16. All right, this one, same thing. The table at the right shows several points of a quadratic function. If x equals -1 is one root of the function, what is the other root? The other root is where y is equal to 0. So y equals, where x equals 2. All right, I'm not writing some of these just for those who like to just watch these and not listen to them. All right, so let's go on to the next page. All right, when we solve the quadratic equations by factoring, remember we need factors of 6 that when we add them equal 7. We've been drilling this quite a bit. We could do this with the box. X squared, 6, so the factors of 6, 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Remember, you can find those in the calculator by going into y equals and doing 6 divided by x and going into the table and 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. But we're looking for the ones that add up to 7. So it's 2 and 1 and 6. So 1x and 6x. We end up with x plus 6 and x plus 1. So there's our factored form, x plus 6 and x plus 1. And what makes that 0? So what makes this one 0? That's going to be x is equal to -6. And what makes this 0? X is equal to -1. Now we could have also done this just by going into here and going x squared plus 7x plus 6, and then putting 0 in y2. And we look on the graph, and it's at -1 and -6 are our two zeros. Just to be sure that they really came out even, we can look on the graph, and when they both equal 0 is at -1 and at -6. So for this one, this is the difference of two squares. So remember, this is like saying x squared plus 0x minus 25. So we need factors of 25 that when I subtract them equal 0. So my factors of 25, if you need a calculator, 25 divided by x, or 1 and 25 and 5 and 5. So which one of those add together, or excuse me, subtract, because that's negative, to 0? All right, so that's x plus 5 and x minus 5. Because this is negative, these signs need to be different. Okay? So what makes this 0? What makes this 0? Oops, sorry, the other way around. What makes this 0 is negative 5. What makes this 0 is positive 5. Or we could have just done x squared minus 25. Look in our graph. We can see that it's at minus 5 and positive 5. Look at our table. Make sure we know that. At positive 5 and at negative 5. And just to be consistent with what I've done so far, you should put the 0 in there so we can see that they're both equal to 0. All right. Sandra wants to solve the equation x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals 20 by using the factoring method. What should be her first step? Now, we didn't do a lot of this in our class, but to factor, it needs to be equal to 0. So the first thing you would do is subtract 20 from both sides. And we end up with x squared plus 2x minus 23. And we're not going to finish this one because it doesn't come out evenly, but that's the first step we'd need to do. So you would write here, subtract 20 from both sides. And I'm not going to write it for those who aren't listening like they're supposed to be. So the length of the pool is 2 times its width. Determine the width of the pool if the area is 98 feet. So remember, area is length times the width. So it would be 2w times w equals 98. So w times w is w squared. So 2w squared equals 98. Now we can solve this by hand, and I will show you in a minute. But remember, you can also just do this way. 2, and just because it says w, we still use x in the calculator. 2x squared equals 98. We go on our graph. And you can't see it here because it's not the zeros. It's where does it equal 98. So we can look at our table. And it's right there. It equals 98 at negative 7. But negative 7, we wouldn't have a width of negative 7, so we'd need a positive one. So we're going to look here on positive and find an answer on positive at positive 7. So the width is equal to 7, which would make the length equal to 2 times 7, which would be 14. If you wanted to do this by hand, to get w by itself, we divide by 2. We'd have w squared equals 49. Square root, because this is squared, so the opposite would be square root. W equals plus and minus 7, but the only one that makes sense is 7. So the width equals 7, because we wouldn't have a negative width. All right, last one on this one. Which of the following correctly represents y equals x squared plus 8x plus 7? Well, just plug in the calculator. X squared plus 8x plus 7. And just look at the graph. Well, it's not that one, because that's in the wrong place. Let's look in the table. Let's see, negative 2 is negative 5, negative 1 is 0, 0 is 7, and 2 is 27. So it must be this one. Remember, if we factor this, factors of 7 that add up to 8. So that would be x plus 7, x plus 1. And then the zeros on this are negative 1, negative 1, and negative 7. So actually, that is correct as well. Unless some people are real picky about the 0 thing, so they would say that the zeros are negative 1, 0, and negative 7, 0. That you have to write out zeros as points, but I don't necessarily do that. So it would be B or D. All right, that's it on this one.